evening. So today we'll be discussing the remaining topics about diagnostic systems and assessment. I'm Dr. Anupa Benny, one of your mentors in the Study Medics platform. So today we'll be discussing about cognition, cognitive tests, memory tests, intelligence assessments in more detail. Disorders of emotion, motor, speech, and self experiences. Then we have neurological and medical overlap about how to differentiate, defense mechanisms and psychodynamic concepts in brief, culture-bound name syndromes and special conditions, and some question answers. So, coming on to intelligence testing. So, I think we've discussed this before. Wechsler's adult intelligence scale. That is, it is a scale. It's mostly very widely used standardized test for assessing adult intelligence or IQ. It is designed for individuals aged between 16 to 90 years and is commonly used in clinical psychology, psychiatry, neuropsychology, and other purposes. So it measures the intellectual ability or the intellectual quotient. The primary indexes that is assessed here is verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. These are the main domains which are assessed in Wechsler's adult intelligence scale. And usually, again, the mean IQ is 100 with a standard deviation of 15. Okay, and so the next one is Wechsler's intelligence scale for children. Here again, it is a most widely used scale for testing intelligence in children, mainly for assessing the cognitive ability in children aged between 6 to 16 years. It is a child version of the Wechsler's adult intelligence scale and used in clinical practice. So again, 5 primary similar indexes are assessed: verbal comprehension, visual spatial functioning, fluid reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. So this is different when compared to adults. So that's important to be noted. Again, the mean score is 100 and standard deviation of 15. So main uses are in order to assess for children with intellectual disabilities, learning disorders, ADHD, autism, and other problems. So it's important to make a note that this is what is used. So now coming on to NART. Well, this is a type of intelligence testing which is used to assess the pre-morbid intelligence. So if they've met with an accident or a head injury, traumatic brain injury, it's important to know the pre-morbid intelligence. So it is a neuropsychological test. It's a national adult reading test. National adult reading test. This is to assess for the pre-morbid IQ estimate. It is a neuropsychological test used to estimate a person's pre-morbid or pre-illness intelligence, particularly in individuals with suspected cognitive decline, such as dementia or acquired brain injury. So what here basically they assess the ability to pronounce irregularly spelled words, which is relatively resistant to early cognitive impairment and reflects previously acquired verbal intelligence. So words like yacht, kernel, coir, isle, and subtle, you need to have a particular learning stage in order to pronounce those, not just the phonic learning. So these words cannot be pronounced directly using standard phonetic rules, and therefore it relies on the prior knowledge. So if the patient is able to pronounce these, it's said that the pre-morbid learning ability is preserved to some extent. So this is important to know. Then we have the concepts that I mentioned before. Intellectual quotient, mean is 100 and standard deviation of 15. Now there is a type of intelligence that is fluid and crystallized version of intelligence. So this here, it is proposed by Raymond Cattell, and the fluid intelligence, which is the novel problem-solving ability, abstract reasoning, right then and there. It's a on-the-spot activity which is assessed, ability which is assessed. So novel, this involves the ability to novel problem solving, abstract reasoning, less dependent on the education, and declines with age. Example, solving Sudoku for the first time, completing a Raven's progressive matrices, identifying the next sequence shape in the sequence. in the Raven's progressive matrices. So that is fluid intelligence. So it is something which is happening then and there. Then while crystallized intelligence means accumulated knowledge and vocabulary depends on the past learning and experience. Generally, it is preserved or improves with age. Some of the examples, again, Raven's progressive matrices is for fluid intelligence. So some of the examples how to assess for this in case of crystallized intelligence is vocabulary, information, subtests of the Wechsler's scales. That mostly assesses for crystallized intelligence, while fluid intelligence is assessed with Raven's progressive matrices. Coming on to Flynn effect. So Flynn effect is something which most of you must be aware of. This is an interesting feature of intellectual quotient, where there's an observation that IQ scores increase from one generation to the next. So this is present in all the countries, and this has been studied all over the world, and this has been an effect that has been found out. And usually the score, the generational increase is usually between 5 to 25 points. And the largest gains appear to occur on tests that measure fluid intelligence. Like I mentioned before, it increases with, it is more found in younger generation. So problem solving, these tests on average have shown an increase of 15 points or 1 standard deviation for each generation. Example, this is tested in Raven's progressive matrices. Okay, so this is about Flynn effect, the rising scores from generation to generation. And some of the some more you can refer for the different paradoxes of Flynn effect. Now coming on to again uses, why we use this intelligence testing. So there is a cutoff of less than 70. There is intellectual disability, and also adaptive deficits are seen in not only intellectual, also the adaptive deficits are seen. Okay, so the NART, or the National Adult Ratings Reading Test, estimates pre-morbid IQ. So because reading ability is relatively preserved in dementia. Okay, so the reading ability will be hampered in case of post-traumatic brain injury if their IQ is affected. Now coming on to working memory model by Baddeley. So in the past slides, session we had discussed about this. This is a sort of working memory is a sort of part of the memory system where it uses data from the short-term memory and uses some certain cognitive processes like calculation or judgment or abstract thinking in order to perform to make a decision or get problem solving. So it has a central executive function, that is, it is an attention controller and allocates resources. Also, the two loops involved in working memory is phonological loop, which involves verbal and or auditory information, and a visual-spatial sketchpad, where you have an imaginary notepad where you can work out the data which is given to you. So basically, for example, calculation, mental mathematics. And this is an episodic buffer, which is also there in working memory. It helps to integrate information from different sources, and it links to the long-term memory and uses the abilities which is acquired at that time. So Baddeley's working memory has a central executive directing toward the phonological loop and visual-spatial sketchpad and an episodic buffer. So this all together forms the working memory model. Now coming on to types of memory. So we have working memory, which is discussed, and it is a part of the short-term memory where cognitive processes are involved using data from the short-term memory. Short-term memory usually lasts for a few seconds, and it can retain 7 plus or minus 2 items. While episodic memory is regarding the personal events in the past. So some personal experience, and they will be able to recall it. That is episodic memory. It is a type of long-term memory. Then you have semantic memory, where it involves knowledge, general knowledge and facts, and also procedural memory, which is skills that is usually preserved even during if the patient has a certain sort of amnesia. Also, it is classified into explicit and implicit memory, declarative or non-declarative. Non-declarative includes procedural memory, while declarative includes episodic and semantic memory. Then you have anterograde and retrograde memory. Anterograde is forming new memories after a particular event. Retrograde is memory before the actual event. Event could be a tragic or a mental shocking event, or it could be an accident. So based on this, you can understand what kind of amnesia has developed. Procedural memory and implicit learning are typically preserved in amnesic syndromes that devastate while episodic memories get devastated. Now, coming on to some examples of amnesic syndromes. We have Korsakoff psychosis, which is a complicated form of Wernicke's encephalopathy, usually developing when there is thiamine deficiency, common in case of alcohol dependence syndrome or any sort of eating disorders. And also you have here what happens is there is global confusion. Anterograde amnesia is seen here. They cannot form new memories. They tend to, when you ask them like what you had for breakfast, what happened yesterday, they tend to give you some information, just giving some information to fill in the blanks of the question. So that's called confabulation. While transient global amnesia is a sudden, isolated but reversible. It can occur in certain psychologically shocking events, like traumatic events, or it can occur for some head injuries, like a transient way. Just the brain is waiting to restart. So at that time, they can develop anterograde amnesia. Then you have dissociated amnesia. Dissociative amnesia. This is a type of dissociative syndrome where you have psychogenic. Its origin is psychogenic. There is no physical trauma involved, and they tend to have gaps of personal information. They tend to have fugue. This is an example. They suddenly get astray. They run away from their place, and they form a new identity there. So that is dissociative fugue. This is sort of amnesic syndrome. Now coming on to a quick scenario about memory. This is mainly a previously well 60-year-old suddenly cannot form new memories for several hours. So repeatedly asking for the same question and then fully recovers. So it is previously completely well, suddenly, that is the clue there, cannot form new memories. That is anterograde amnesia for several hours, and they keep on asking the same question. They cannot, if you give the answer, they forget it, and after some time they again ask the same question, and after that they fully recover. So this is a transient global amnesia, an abrupt, isolated, reversible anterograde amnesic syndrome with preserved identity and no other deficits. Identity is not preserved in case of dissociative fugue. Now coming on to neuropsychological assessment. Here it is used in case of brain injuries or any neurological deficits, sudden development of cognitive dysfunction. A neuropsychological assessment is important to be done. Here it helps to quantify and localize deficits. So the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe functions are assessed, and it's basically a battery of questions, and it helps to localize the deficit area. So there's a baseline score and can change over time. So after the injury or after the event, traumatic event, when you assess them, they'll have a baseline score, and later on it tends to change over time. Some of the popular batteries that are used, neuropsychological batteries, are Halstead-Reaton battery, Luria, Nebraska, and other domain-specific tests, which helps to localize the deficit. So the domains which are usually assessed are memory, attention, language, executive functioning, and visuospatial functioning. Neuropsychological tests complements the bedside screens by quantifying and localizing deficits and tracking change over time. So bedside tests, which we usually apply in MSc or short cognitive assessments, while this is a huge number of questions are involved. Now coming on to structured diagnostic instruments. So these are actual scales which are assessed, which the patient is assessed for. So you have these scales that are involved. These are structured clinical interviewing diagnostic instruments. So the clinician interviews are structured clinical interview or SCID for DSM diagnosis. This mainly it is based on DSM-5. It is a semi-structured diagnostic interview used by trained clinicians to diagnose psychiatric disorders according to the criteria of DSM. Now the next is SCAN or PSC. So the SCAN is basically schedules for clinical assessment in neuropsychiatry. Schedule for clinical assessment in neuropsychiatry. This is a semi-structured diagnostic interview developed by WHO and is based on ICD-10. ICD-11 now. So it has both ICD-10 and DSM, while SCID is only for DSM, based on DSM diagnosis. And you have present state examination. Now, MINI is also the full form is the MINI International Neuropsychiatric Interview. It is a brief structured diagnostic interview designed to diagnose major psychiatric disorders according to both DSM and ICD-10, ICD-11. So, structured clinical interview is based on DSM, while the others schedule for clinical assessments in neuropsychiatry, present state examination, and MINI International Neuropsychiatric Interview is based on both classes of diagnosis, that is DSM and ICD. So these were developed to provide a rapid yet reliable alternative to longer diagnostic interviews. Okay, the MINI brief structured interview. The other two are pretty long interviews. Now, for the epidemiological studies, the Composite International Diagnostic Interview, or CIDI, Composite International Diagnostic Interview, it is a fully structured, common man can apply this. So a clinician knowledge is not required. That's why it can be applied by a layman. And it is mainly for population survey. So this is important to know. The other one, the first class that we discussed, SCID, SCAN and MINI are interviews applied by clinicians. And the MINI is the most shortest version compared to SCID and SCAN. SCID is only in based on DSM diagnosis, while SCAN, PSC and MINI are both DSM and ICD-10 based, ICD based. CID is mainly for epidemiologic purposes and can be applied by common person. Now for documentation, we have the AMDP's interview, that is Association for Methodology and Documentation. Association for Methodology and Documentation in Psychiatry. So this is a standard, this looks for standardized psychopathology terms and ratings. So this, unlike SCID, MINI and SCAN or CIDI, it is not diagnostic, it's not a diagnostic interview, but a structured method for recording psychiatric symptoms. So just these terms are there, and you cannot come into a diagnosis with this type of, it is a type of documentation only, it is not for diagnostic purposes. So the others can be used for diagnosis, and this is not used for diagnosis, this is just for documentation. SCID is a clinician administered for based on DSM diagnosis. CIDI is fully structured and lay administered for large epidemiological surveys. So these are important to be remembered. This can come for your MCQs. Now coming on to one of the questions, DigitSpan is a primary test. Is primarily a test of long-term memory, attention and working memory, language, executive function, praxis. So clearly it is for attention and working memory. DigitSpan forward, reverse. Here you use the data, the short-term memory data is used, the immediate memory is used. They give you certain numbers, you keep it in your mind, and you have to produce it in the forward way and the backward way. So there are cognitive processes going on. So attention is used here, and it is part of working memory. So DigitSpan forward and reverse indexes attention and working memory capacity is assessed, not the long-term storage. Second question here is, which test is used to estimate pre-morbid intelligence? That is NART. Now, so that is used for assessing pre-morbid IQ. Reading of irregular words is preserved in case of dementia. So the NART estimates pre-morbid IQ. Now coming on to disorders of emotion and affect. Here it is reduced. If it is reduced, the emotion and affect is reduced. It is the terms that are used when you do your MSc. You can use blunting, flattening. There is reduced range of emotion. While also apathy is found where there is reduced motivation. When they talk to you, you cannot find any sort of energy. And anhedonia. This is a sort of thing which you can assess and you get it with during your history taking. Any loss of pleasure or emotional involvement when they do something which they like to do before. And altered quality. Here, incongruity is an important term to be known. When they talk to you and the content of the thought and the affect is incongruent. It's known as sort of mismatched affect. So when they talk to you and the content is not matching with the affect, the way they talk to you. So they might laugh and say that somebody passed away. They look very happy and they say that. So it could be that could be due to they're going through grief. They're having a dissociative action there. Or it could be in psychotic patients who cannot follow what has happened or some things like that. So that's an incongruity of affect. Then you have lability, which the rapid shifts. They start crying, then suddenly they are all happy. Then again they fall into tears. This is seen in mainly mania. Bell and difference is again a sort of altered quality of emotion or affect where they are unconcerned of their physical deficits. Based on recognition, tell you what they are, how they are feeling, how they are, why they are in their state right now. So they basically they cannot name their emotion. That is alexithymia. Blunted affect means reduced intensity range. Incongruity means affect that does not match the thought content. Example, laughing while describing a tragedy. Disorders of motor behavior. So motor, it's part of your MSc when you come into the psychomotor activity, PMA. There you have to mention if there's any sort of abnormal movement in the body. So if you can see, these are the possible signs that can be observed and you can note it down. So catatonic signs is, again, we had discussed yesterday: stupor, posturing, laxy flexibility, negativism, ambitendency. Repetitive behaviors like stereotypies, purposeless repetitive movements with no particular goal. While mannerisms are odd but goal-directed. Tics are again involuntary movements, found repetitive movements that are there. Then you have echo and drug-related. So you have echopraxia, that whatever you do, the patient tends to copy it. It is echopraxia, copies the movements. Akathisia, dyskinesia, tremors, these are all drug-induced side effects. Stereotypies are repetitive non-goal-directed movements. Mannerisms are odd but goal-directed and are frequently tested. This is how it is distinguished. Then you have disorders of speech and language. Here, based on the articulation melody of the speech, it is you have certain disorders like dysarthria. Here, the articulation is affected. They know what to say, but because of certain pain or maybe incoordination of the muscles, there is dysarthria or problems with the articulation of the muscles involved in speech. Dysprosody is loss of melody of the speech. So they are very monotonous tone. They'll tell you that they got some promotion, but it will be very monotonous tone. Output of speech. Here, poverty of speech or alogia. Pressure of speech is found in mania, and mutism in case of catatonia and severe depression. Also in some sort of psychosis also is there. Abnormal forms, some terms are neologisms. They find new words which are not actually there. Like they describe the stomach as the food bowl, or they find new words. And common persons cannot really understand right then and there. You need to ask them why, what is that, and they tell you the meaning. Echolalia is repetition of what they say. Again, palilalia is there, then logoclonia is there. Palilalia is repeating their own words or phrases again and again. Echolalia is echo from the other person, repeating what the other person is saying. Then you have perseveration, which inappropriate repetition of a response despite a change in question or context. This is like the speech version of stereotypes. So you have perseveration. Perseveration is, if you ask them what's your name, they tell you the answer. Then again, they next question is where do you live? They give you the same answer. This is what the name they told you. That is perseveration. While verbicuration, a meaningless stereotype repetition of words or phrases. So this is also repetition of speech for no particular reason. We just repeat it for no reason. Coming on to logoclonia. This is a speech disorder characterized by repetitive repetition of the final syllable or part of a word. It is a form of perseverative speech and is most commonly associated with advanced neurodegenerative disorders. So the last sound of the word is repeated for no particular reason. That is logoclonia. Again, dysprosody is the loss of normal melody or rhythm of speech. It differs from dysarthria, which is the disorder of articulation. Now, coming on to certain perceptual abnormalities. So you have functional hallucinations. That is, there is a stimulus in a particular domain, in a sensory domain, and this triggers hallucination in the same modality. So if you hear, for example, is when you hear someone, when you hear the bell ringing, you hear the water tap opening, the tap, water falling from the tap. So that is in the same modality. You hear something and as a stimulus, and you hear something else unrelated to that. Reflex hallucination is stimulus in one modality. That is, when you hear the chalk screeching on the board, you get a shivering tactile sensation on your body. So that is auditory, and it gives you a tactile sensation. That is reflex hallucination. While extracampine hallucination that I mentioned, I think yesterday, it is a type of sensory hallucination where you can sense things outside your sensory field or peripheral field or vision, or the auditory possibility. So example, they'll tell you in a delusion, they'll say that I can hear them talking about me when you're in India, they're talking bad about me in London or something like that. It's just not possible. So it is away from it's outside your sensory field. Now coming on to hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucination. Here hypnagogic is listening or hearing something which is like a hallucination while going to sleep. That is hypnagogic. And hypnopompic is while waking up from sleep. These are normal and it is not abnormal. Otoscopy is seeing oneself, your own image. While negative otoscopy is when you look into the mirror, you don't see yourself, you don't understand yourself. Pseudo hallucination is something which is not a hallucination, they just think I heard something or I can see something. They're aware of it. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations are usually benign, and extracampine hallucination is perceived beyond normal sensory field. Coming on to disorders of self and body. Ego boundary, loss of self-world boundary. This is usually present in psychosis. Depersonalization, self feels unreal and detached from the self, and you can see that you're somewhere else. Derealization is realizing that things that are happening around you is not real, could not be real. Not complete belief, it is not a fixed belief, but it's something is like that. And based on body image, autotopagnosia. It is a neurological disorder in which a person is unable to identify parts of their body, localized parts of their body. If you tell them to touch your big toe, right big toe, they might find that difficult. Okay, and phantom limb is sensation of presence of that limb even though it is amputated. Anosognosia is denial of deficit. So even though they have an abnormality, they're not able to accept it or understand it. So repetitive purposeless movements with no goal are termed as stereotypes. Mannerisms are with goal. Tics are just movements. It could be vocal body movements also. And echopraxia is repeating what the other person is doing. Dyskinesia is sort of drug-induced side effect. So the answer is stereotype is repetitive non-goal directed movements. Mannerisms is actually goal directed but odd movements. could be found in autism spectrum disorders. Difficulty identifying and describing one's own emotion. Anhedonia is reduced pleasure in previously enjoyed activities. Alexithymia is what the answer is. Cannot explain or describe one's own emotion. Apathy is lack of emotion. Blunting, again, lack of reduced range of emotion. Incongruity is mismatched emotion or affect. So alexithymia is difficulty in recognizing and verbalizing emotions, often seen in somatic presentations. Coming to a quick scenario, a patient with schizophrenia holds an uncomfortable posture for a long time, even though they might get tired, like a normal person would get tired. So when you move his arm, it stays where it is placed, goes back. It's called baxiflexibility, also seria flexibilitas. So catatonia is the condition where this is found. It is a motor sign needing medical review. Treat with benzodiazepine and ECT. So delirium, coming to delirium versus dementia, we have discussed this before. So we have the three discriminating points here. Delirium is acute, fluctuating, has reduced attention, clouding of consciousness, and it is reversible. While dementia is insidious, progressive, consciousness is clear, and in the earlier times it's clear, and it is progressive. So screening is with using 4A test. That is, you have alertness, age, date, birthplace, and current year, attention, and acute change or fluctuating course. These are the 4 A's. So you have this scale is used for identifying delirium, and the other scale is confusion assessment method. It is very widely used, and the 4 points which are used here are acute onset of fluctuating course, inattention, disorganized thinking, altered level of consciousness. Coming to dementia, it is insidious, progressive, early clear consciousness, and attention is relatively preserved, and it is not usually reversible unless it is a reversible type of dementia. In case of thyroid dysfunction or hydrocephalus brain, these are reversible types of dementia. Acute onset with fluctuating course and impaired attention points mostly towards delirium. And it's insidious onset, progressive, clear conscious in the early period, and preserved attention is dementia. So coming on to next section is medical conditions with psychiatric features. So this mostly the neuropsychiatric conditions. We have Wilson's disease. Here, it is involved with accumulation of copper in the liver. This can cause certain psychiatric problems also, like psychosis, things like that. It's onset in young people. It is accompanied with tremors and a case of facial rings. Hypothyroidism comes with depression, cognitive slowing. Hypothyroidism can come with anxiety, mania-like stage. B12 deficiency can cause cognitive impairment and low mood, also folate deficiency. Pheochromocytoma, here you can see episodic anxiety, palpitations, increased blood pressure. SLE and porphyria, you can see psychosis and mood changes. New psychiatric symptoms with physical signs, mainly tremors, weight change, skin change, paroxysmal BP, warrant an organic screen before a primary diagnosis. So when it is sudden onset and acute onset, it's always important to keep in mind of these possibilities. Coming on to neurological conditions and psychiatry, here epilepsy. In epilepsy, there is involvement of temporal lobe epilepsy. You have automatisms, deja vu experiences, post-ictal psychosis, and sudden unpredictable death in epilepsy. So this is a term which should be known. That is sudden, unexpected, non-traumatic and non-drowning death of a person with epilepsy with or without evidence of seizure. In its post-mortem examination does not reveal any other cause of death. This is just a sudden, unexpected death. This is a risk in case of epilepsy. Movement disorder. Here we have Huntington's disorder with chorea and psychiatric symptoms, mainly psychotic features are seen. Also in Parkinson's, you have depression or psychosis also can occur. In case of neuromuscular disorders, in case of myasthenia gravis, they tend to be fatigable easily, and all the time weaknesses are found to be there. Lambert-Eaton syndrome improves with use, and small cell lung carcinoma is also involved, psychiatric symptoms. Myasthenia worsens with repeated effort. Lambert-Eaton paraneoplastic type of syndrome improves transiently with use of muscles. This is a point which can be discriminated. Endocrine causes of psychiatric symptoms. Again, hypothyroidism causes depression, slowing. Hyperthyroidism, you have symptoms like anxiety and mania-like symptoms. Involving adrenal gland like Cushing syndrome, depression and psychosis is seen. Addison's, you tend to see apathy and depression. Cushing's also, you have when treated with steroids, you tend to get manic. Then in case of calcium imbalances, hypercalcemia, they tend to have depressive mood and cognitive changes. So if they give you a scenario with stones, bones and moans, you have to think about hypercalcemia. Both hypo and hypothyroidism mimic primary psychiatric disorders. So it is important to check for thyroid function in newly presenting mood or anxiety presentations. Coming on to nutritional and vitamin deficiencies, you have thiamine, Wernicke's and Korsakoff syndrome. B12 and folate deficiency, you have cognitive impairment, low mood. Niacin B3, pellagra, dementia, dermatitis and diarrhea are the symptoms, triad. And then vitamin D deficiency, low mood can be associated with this. Iron imbalance, you have fatigue and poor concentration. Sometimes there also can be with palpitations. Pellagra, niacin deficiency gives a triad of dementia, dermatitis and diarrhea. Thiamine deficiency is associated with Wernicke's and Korsakoff, mainly cognitive symptoms. Coming on to infective and autoimmune causes associated with psychiatric symptoms. So HIV, in the later stages, they tend to develop dementia. So an early onset of dementia could be a pointer towards checking for HIV, mainly untreated forms, which is actually rare. And also they can have mood disorders like mania. Then neurosyphilis. Here, general paresis of the insane. Here they tend to find symptoms like grandiosity, dementia, and disinhibition. Okay, this is caused by chronic infection of the brain by Treponema pallidum, and it develops in a very later chronic stage. That is, maybe after 10 to 30 years of untreated syphilis. This is also rare, but if it's not found initially, it can progress to that after these many years. Now, coming on to autoimmune diseases. Here again, it's a commonly checked out when the psychosis doesn't improve. Like an NMDA profile is done. So anti-NMDA encephalitis, which is associated with psychosis and seizures, and also SLE is accompanied with psychosis and mood change. So it's important to screen when there are atypical signs in your psychiatric patients, and also always keep in mind these are the possibilities. There's an organic possibility, and that's why we do routine blood checkups. Look for neuroscience, age of onset, and fever before or recent or ongoing fever. So anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis can present as new psychosis with seizure and movement disorder. This should be considered an atypical rapid onset case of psychosis or any sort of psychiatric presentations. Anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. A quick scenario. A 45-year-old develops low mood, fatigue, cold intolerance, weight gain, cognitive slowing over several months. So it's clearly involved with thyroid, hypothyroidism, presenting as depression. New psychiatric symptoms with tremor, casoflacia rings in a young adult suggests Wilson's. Huntington's, you have chorea, like involuntary movements in a rhythmic way. Hyperthyroidism, we don't have any casoflacia rings. It's just the increased BMI, loss of weight, anger, irritability. Neuroblastoma also anxiety, palpitations. Myasthenia gravis, dullness, weakness. So you can rule that out here. Copper accumulation causes young onset neuropsychiatric symptoms, tremors, and casoflacia rings. It's treatable. Second question, muscle weakness that improves transiently with repeated use linked to small cell carcinoma is Lambert-Eaton syndrome. Myasthenia gravis, it weakens with repeated use. Guillain-Barré, again, progressive muscle weakening. Okay, so that's how you can differentiate. Lambert-Eaton syndrome is a paraneoplastic disorder accompanied with small cell carcinoma, and the strength improves with repeated contraction of muscles. A 30-year-old has episodic anxiety, sweating, palpitations, and severe headaches with paroxysmal hypertension. We have discussed this. Pheochromocytoma. Then there's catecholamine excess mimicking a panic attack, anxiety disorder. You need to screen with plasma and urine, presence of metanephrines. Okay. Now coming on to some psychodynamic terms. You have defense mechanisms. So it's based on maturity. It is divided into three forms: the mature defense mechanism, neurotic defense mechanisms, immature defense mechanisms. So here it's important to know these subdivisions, and it can come as a question, which is in the following, which is a mature defense mechanism. That's humor, sublimation, altruism, suppression. Neurotic defense mechanisms, we have repression, displacement, reaction formation, intellectualization. And immature, you have denial, projection, splitting, acting out, regression. Okay. So sublimation is a channeling impulse. It's channeling impulses to acceptable activity in the society. It is a mature sort of defense mechanism, while splitting and projection are immature. So we can just discuss in brief about these types of defense mechanisms. Projection. This is a sort of immature defense mechanism. Here what happens is they project their inabilities on others. So if I am having a deficit, like I'm not able to study driving, so I blame it on others. It's because they have not done something. It's because of their problem. Okay. So that is projection. So this refers to perceiving and reacting to unacceptable inner problems as though it originated from an outside source. So a person who attributes hostility to others may be unconsciously projecting their own hostility. That is one of the examples. So attributing own feelings onto others' problems as others' problems. Displacement. Displacement is redirecting affect to a safer target. So the process by which the interest or emotion is shifted from one object to another, less threatening, often less retaliating one. So example, so they might have a difficult inside thought, and it is displaced by a less retaliating or problematic thought. So suppose one who is told off by her consultant during a clinical supervision may displace the anger felt onto her spouse, who is not very problematic. It's not giving your job at stake. So if you're angry at work, or you get fired at work, or you get shouted at work, you come and show it to your pet dog or your children. So displacing it onto another safer target. Okay. So reaction formation, behaving opposite to the true feeling. So this involves transforming an unacceptable impulse into its exact opposite. So when you're feeling sad, you bring it out as happiness. So mainly its mechanism is frequently used at an early stage of ego development. It can become a permanent character trait as in an obsessional personality. So something what you feel, you don't express it, you express the complete opposite. Okay. Then you have sublimation that was mentioned before, channeling impulses constructively. You have certain emotions, but you bring it down into a socially acceptable form. Okay, so that's about sublimation. Sublimation is a mature sort of defense mechanism, while reaction formation is a sort of neurotic defense mechanism. Now, splitting. This is a sort of immature defense mechanism. So here it's an all or none law, or 1 or 0, or black and white sort of view. So if either everything is bad or everything is good. This is usually found in emotionally unstable personality disorders. And identification is defense mechanism is adopting another person's quality, or you can also call it modeling. Splitting seeing people as all good or all bad, there's no gray area, is characteristic of emotionally unstable personality disorders. Most psychodynamic concepts are about the model of the mind proposed by Freud. So you have structural model, topographic model. So you have structural model is id, ego and superego. Id is the unconscious part of the mind. Ego is based on reality, the conscious part, and superego. Superego is conscience. So something which is always right and you do the right things. It's based on how you're bringing up and what you learned morally from your parents or elders. And it is what you actually want to do. And both these together will give you a neutral way how to behave, bring it out. That is ego. It comes out in reality. So suppose you want to go for a movie and by bunking classes. So it tells you to just go for the movie. It's okay, just bunk class and go. You can just go. While your superego plays there and says that it's wrong, you cannot go, you can't bunk classes. Well, your ego gives you a rational possibility here. Okay, there are no classes for now, so you can just give them some different information, and you can go for the movie. So it's in a reality form, in a practical way. You get the answer. You bring it out in a practical way. Now, coming on to some processes of psychodynamic psychology, you have transference. This is a feeling which is from the patient onto the therapist, and countertransference is the feeling of the therapist onto the patient. So if there's a transference developing, it's important to talk to the patient or look for a change in the therapist if the therapist identifies this. And the countertransference also is something which the therapist develops towards the patient, and it's a UPD patient or it is a somatoform disorder patient, and you don't get any good out of their treatment. They don't cooperate, they don't comply with your treatment patterns and your therapy related exercises. So you tend to develop a negative attitude towards the patient. So it's important to identify these and work it out. Others are ego boundary disturbances in psychosis and other defense mechanisms. Transference is the patient directing feelings about past figures onto the therapist. Countertransference is the therapist's reaction. So here it could be that the patient is relating to the therapist as their close friend or their father figure, mother figure, spouse. So it can hinder the therapy. Now, coming on to defense mechanisms, again, this was discussed in the past slides. I'm just repeating it. Mature is humor, sublimation, altruism, suppression. Neurotic is repression, displacement, reaction formation, intellectualization, rationalization, and undoing. The mature defense mechanisms include denial, projection, splitting, acting out, regression, and idealization. Suppression is consciously postponing attention to an impulse. This is a mature sort of defense mechanism, while repression is unconscious exclusion. It is a sort of neurotic defense mechanism. Now, based on transference and therapy concepts, we have transference. There is positive and negative transference onto the therapist. This can be helpful and unhelpful in certain scenarios. Countertransference is the therapist's emotional response towards the patient. So this can help, but sometimes it cannot help too. Now, how do you work this out? By resisting these emotions, working through. The patient says, I'm not comfortable with this counselor. You need to tell them you need to work through this. It can help you in the future when you interact with different people. And it's important to form a therapeutic alliance with the patient and give a free associating bonding, like always not being very specific and close-ended type of approach. It should be more open. Countertransference, once seen only as a hindrance, is now used as information about patient's impact on others. So this is something you can get a quality about the patient here. Freud's models of mind, topographical, structural. So here topographical is consciousness, conscious, preconscious, unconscious. Conscious is what you see, preconscious is right. The important things or the moral points is in the preconscious. Unconscious is what your inner drive, which is repressed and it doesn't really come out. While structural, we discussed this before, it is pleasure-based, pleasure-driven, ego is reality-driven, and superego is the moral values, conscience. So when there is discomfort in the unconscious, it flicks through the preconscious and comes out as anxiety, and it can bring out defense mechanisms to deal with the situation and help to manage conflicts. Clinical scenario here is a man furious with his boss says nothing at work, then comes home and shouts at his children over something very minute. So this is shifting something big when they have an experience from a dangerous person. It is brought down to a safer target. Okay. So you're displacing that from another person to that emotion towards another person to another person. That is displacement, redirecting an unacceptable effect from its real target to a safer target. This is a neurotic type of defense mechanism. Now, coming on to some questions. Attributing one's own unacceptable feelings to another person is called, it's not displacement. Displacement we already discussed, involves two people. It's transferred, that emotion towards risky target is transferred to a safer target. That is displacement. Projection is what is mentioned here, attributing one's own unacceptable feelings on towards others. Sublimation is you have certain emotions, you jot it down and bring it down to a socially acceptable output. And then you have reaction formation. What you're feeling is not brought out. What you're feeling, the opposite emotion is brought out. Denial is completely denying the situation or your illness. So here, projection. Unacceptable internal feelings are attributed to someone else's problem. It is an immature sort of defense mechanism. Yeah, the second question is the patient's tendency to see staff as either wonderful or terrible and keep switching here and there. This two emotions, all or none law. This is splitting. This is sort of neurotic defense mechanism. Okay, polarized all good, all bad perception, characteristic of emotionally unstable personality disorder. Splitting is a type of immature defense mechanism. Okay. So coming on to the next section. Culture-bound symptoms. Most of you must be aware of this. This can come for your questions, the multiple choice questions. Coro is a Southeast Asia related anxiety disorder. Like mainly they are fearful if their genitals may retract back and it might not exist anymore. And then running amok is something which we use commonly. So amok is sudden violent outburst. This is easy to remember. Southeast Asia again. Lata is a Malaysian origin culture-bound syndrome where they tend to have echolalia and startle expression. Dart syndrome is present in South Asia. So when sometimes when they see their semen is lost, or when they masturbate, they seem to feel that their body's getting weak and they're losing all their energy because of this. Vindigo. Vindigo is a North American sort of type of culture-bound syndrome which involves cannibal compulsion. They tend to feel the urge to eat or perform cannibal activities. Then you have brain fog, where children who study a lot, or even in mothers who are very exhausted, or people who are very exhausted, they tend to forget things, or everything appears very confusing and they can't recall things. This is brain fog. Then you have classic EMI, this thing. Here you have Coro, Amok, Dart. These are the common classic EMI pairs which are there in your MCQs. Some more named delusion syndromes. These are not culture bound, but just named interesting ones can come for your exams. So theme delusions, you have de Clerambault syndrome, mainly found in mania or with disinhibition, can also occur in psychosis. Erotomania. Okay, then you have Othello syndrome, delusional jealousy, where they have delusion of infidelity. Cotard syndrome, which was discussed yesterday, nihilistic delusion. feeling that their body is non-existent, rotting, or dead. Then you have infestation or shared type of delusions, that is egg bomb syndrome, when they have feeling that they are infested by parasites, and they show it to you. They pick up. It's just broken skin or particles in your hair or body, broken or dead skin. They bring it in a matchbox. That's also called a matchbox sign, and they tell you these are the parasites. So even if they tell you it's under the skin, or if you tell them to apply shampoo and it's gone, they'll tell you it's under the skin. If you try to tell them if we can perform certain sort of procedure to take it out, they might say it's difficult to convince them. And also people who are, like I mentioned before, we have studied before, when there's a social drift due to psychosis, they tend to get withdrawn from society. When it's a small group of 2 or 3 people, they tend to share this delusion. So that is shared delusion. So both the husband and wife, or the mother and daughter, they tend to believe the same thing, which is not actually true. So that is Foley Ardor, or it is shared delusion. Now again, there's a risk here for Othello syndrome. Risk to the partner. They might try to harm them, or threaten, life-threatening problems can occur here. So it's always important to assess for violence risk and suggest for geographical separation of the couple. Othello morbid jealousy carries a real risk of violence to the partner. B. Clarenbold syndrome or erotomania believes that another person secretly loves them. So a great celebrity loves them. Okay. Now some of the special conditions which was discussed before. In case of functional disorders, you have alexithymia, difficulty in naming their emotions. We have psychogenic polydipsia, where excessive water is consumed and causes hyponatremia. Again, motor behavior, it's important to rule out any sort of comorbid medical conditions also. In case of psychogenic polydipsia, it's important to rule out other possible medical problems than before diagnosing it as this way. Then based on motor and behavior, you have copropraxia, obscene gestures can occur in Tourette syndrome. And coprolalia is obscene speech. Grief, based on grief, you have prolonged grief disorder, which is a new term introduced in ICD-11. Caseness, that is a threshold in order to identify it as a case. Some of the new terms. Yeah, psychogenic polydipsia can cause life-threatening hyponatremia, and it can also cause dilution of the drugs which they are taking. This is also a problem here. So it's important to monitor fluid balance and sodium levels. Some more Koro in East Asia, you have Koro, Hua Byung, Korean anger illness. Tajin Kifusho is offending others. Then in other regions, Susto is soul loss in Latin America. Hublokotok is Arctic hysteria. Okay. Then you have, again, these are East Asia, Japan origin. Tajin Kifoso is a social anxiety variant centered on fear of offending or embarrassing others. The reverse focus of Western social phobia. So this may come. These have come, so I'm not sure if they might repeat, but it's important to just know about it. So some of the eponymous syndromes and signs. So you have Coward syndrome. This is pseudo pregnancy related issues, when the partner experiences the same symptoms as the pregnant wife. So sympathetic pregnancy symptoms in a partner. Okay. Then you have Ganser syndrome, where the patient tends to give you approximate answers, which does not make sense. This is seen in prisoners. They give these answers for no particular reason. There's no gain here. Then you have Munchausen syndrome, which has a secondary gain here. So factitious disorder, feigned illness. It can come by proxy also, by when they show you that the child is sick, to get more care and attention. Then you have Diogenes. Diogenes is mainly senile squalor due to senile self-neglect and hoarding. So this can be seen in psychotic patients, in old age patients. Coming on to D. Clarenbold syndrome, which was discussed earlier, erotomania, feeling that someone famous or like a celebrity or famous scientist or someone like that, which is out of your cultural background and you don't know that person, you feel that they are having a love connection with the patient. Charles-Bonnet syndrome is visual hallucination, mainly seen in patients with some eye disease where they have to keep their eyes covered after the procedure. Charles-Bonnet syndrome is complex visual hallucination and visually impaired with intact insight. Cancers is again approximate answers. Coming on to grief disorders, normal versus abnormal forms. In normal forms, they have certain episodes of yearning for the passed away person, transient presence of the passed away person. Abnormal forms are delayed, absent, prolonged, like maybe more than 6 to 1 year, 6 months to 1 year, they still have it. That's delayed. Absent is they have not gone through the normal stages of grief. Chronic and distorted forms. Prolonged grief disorder is introduced in ICD-11. That is more than 6 months of grief symptoms. Persisting, disabling, and longing for that person. Distinguish normal grief. Fluctuating, non-disabling, fleeting hallucinations of the deceased can be normal. It should be differentiated from a depressive disorder, which needs treatment. Quick scenario here. A man from South Asia presents with fatigue, anxiety, conviction that he's losing vitality through loss of semen in his urine. So that's THAAT syndrome. A culture-bound idiom of distress, attributing fatigue, anxiety to semen loss. It is managed with explanation and treatment of comorbid anxiety and depression. Some of questions here. Culturally bound acute anxiety that the genitals are retracting into the body is CORO. Culture-bound syndrome in Southeast Asia of acute anxiety that the genitals are shrinking or retracting. Difficulty in identifying and describing one's own emotions. Alexithymia. A patient with schizophrenia drinks liters of water daily and is brought in confused and fitting. So the sodium is 180. Okay, so that's psychogenic polydipsia, causing dilutional hyponatremia. So you need to restrict fluids and correct the sodium levels. Channeling unacceptable impulses into a socially acceptable activity is which defense mechanism? It is sublimation. Okay. It is a mature sort of defense mechanism. It redirects unacceptable drives into constructive, socially valued activity. So they have a lot of anger in their mind. So they might just convert it into a boxing form of sport and get it out like that. Acute confusional state with fluctuating consciousness, remarkably impaired attention is most likely. I'm sure most of you have guessed the right answer. Delirium. So some of the points here are, these are never there. That is, treat new psychiatric symptoms without organ screening. Should not be done. Mistake digit span for long-term memory test. Digit span is for short-term memories test and also working memories applied here. Calling hypnagogic hallucination psychotic is very wrong. So you need, if they tell you an elaborate hallucinatory experience, you need to tell them, was it there when you were wide awake, like when you're talking to me right now, or was it during your sleep? Okay. Can occur most of the times like that. Then overlooking hyponatremia is in psychogenic polydipsia. You need to look for other causes also. Then you have, and it's important to manage it very promptly, check by checking sodium levels and their state of mind. Always do this. Distinguish delirium from dementia. Delirium is acute, while dementia is chronic. Match the defense mechanism, whether it is in the maturity tier. You need to learn that mature, neurotic, and immature. Pair each culture-bound syndrome to its particular feature. Again, you can learn from tables. Screen for Wilson's young onset neuropsychiatric cases. Then you have assessment based on assessment and perception, single best answer. You have attention, working memory. You can digit span test. So pre-morbid IQ, NART, adult reading test, national adult reading test. Then you have falling asleep is going to sleep. So hypnagogic, falling asleep hallucination. Gap filling memory is confabulation. Korsakoff caused by time and deficiency. Acute fluctuating reduced attention. Acute and fluctuating, again delirium has to come into your mind. Taser-Fleischer ring, young patient with psychiatric symptoms. You always think of Wilson's disease if there's a possibility here. Again, improves with use of muscles. Lambert-Eaton syndrome associated with small cell carcinoma. And you have worsens with use of myasthenia gravis. Episodic increased BP, sweating, pheochromocytoma. Depression with slowing symptoms, hypothyroidism. Temporal lobe and deja vu experience, epilepsy. About defense mechanisms and psychodynamics, you have channeled constructively sublimation, mature defense mechanism. Own feelings onto others, projection, immature defense mechanism. All good, all bad splitting, again immature sort of. And opposite to true feeling, reaction formation, neurotic. And again, just recheck. Feelings onto therapist, developing feelings towards therapist based on certain people in your life, that is transference. In the immature tire, you have denial, projection and splitting. Genital retraction. Oro, violent outburst is run amok. Semen loss anxiety, Dart syndrome. Delusional jealousy, Othello syndrome. Erotomania, de Clerambault syndrome. Can't name the emotions is alexithymia. Okay, now based on some clues you can use for your extended multiple choices. You have syndromes, you can connect it with the name. Genital retraction, Coro, sudden violence, amok, startle and echolalia, Lata syndrome. Nihilistic delusion, Cowards is pseudo pregnancy or pseudocysis. Then you have delusional manifestation, Ekbom syndrome. K-Fring's tremor, Wilson's disease, improves with use, Lambert-Eaton, paroxysmal increase of BP, pheochromocytoma, confabulation, Korsakoff, hyponatremia and water with no other possible physical problems, psychogenic depolydipsia. So that completes our sessions. So these are the topics that we discussed. I hope it was helpful for you. So please keep these, again revise it, culture bound syndromes and their features to how to remember each. Then you have defense mechanism, which tire it comes under, mature, immature, neurotic, and matching it in, accordingly. Okay, thank you.